right? And business model canvas is the other one, right? The 9 boxes. Right? I'm sure most Indians are familiar with horoscopes, right? With 12 boxes, right? The problem with the horoscope is it's fixed to your time of birth. The business model canvas is not fixed, right? You need the ability to tweak your business model, right? And what this framework does, it gives you some common language based on which you can have a conversation with your team, with your mentors, with your customers, and all that kind of thing, right? And the canvas is brilliant. I haven't seen any innovation like this since Potter's value map, right? The one where Five Forces is one, then he did another one on how you break down, from in to out. I forget the term, right? Because it's almost so old. I almost don't think of it, right? Five Forces wants to use this, right, for business plans. But this was actually an amazing innovation, because if you think about the canvas, right? You don't have to see the one since you have the one in front. You go left to right, you're actually going from input to output, right? And the value you're creating, why somebody buys from you and not somebody else, is your value proposition, right? So if whenever I talk about left-hand side of the canvas, I'm talking about, this is where, when we talked earlier about what it requires for business success, and we talked about team. Teams are very important for the left-hand side. It's execution. Okay? You need the dreamers to think of the right-hand side. Right? So again, team is important, but the idea is even more important. Right? Especially if you are a startup. Right? So you dream on the right and you execute on the left. And you often need both, right? It's like needing your left brain and your right brain, right? You can be analytical about one part, but on the other part, you need to be almost daring, right? And I would say you need to be daring on the right side and probably, not on the right side, especially value proposition, customer segment. Maybe the other things you can innovate as well. You can innovate on your channel to market. You can innovate on the kind of relationships that you build with the customer. It's hard, but certainly, some innovation is possible, but definitely the value proposition is where you dream. And then you execute pretty much on the left-hand side, because we need all of those elements, right? Right? Activities, what do you do? Resources that you need. Right? Sometimes resources, your ability to get resources is extremely important. Right? Okay. Yeah. I'm saying the same thing I said earlier in a different way. Right? So this was what the original 9-year-old book came up with. Right? What is your market? Who's your customer segment? It could be the mass market. Airtel has subscribers, right? B2C tends to be mass market. Right? Niche markets, which are B2B, and then you need to really define which B, right? You're not focusing on everything. And then you have segmented markets, which is MGH Labs, right? Your Bob Rocket, right? They have the B2C version, which seems to be selling like hotcakes, right? And then, but they originally wanted to be a B2B company, right? And that's where they had aimed to survive value. So you have a diversified market, right? It's not a question of good or bad. It's your ability to manage two different market segments, because how you manage market segments is completely different. I think in their case, they've been a bit lucky in the way the B2C market took off, right? So why not, right? They didn't want to leave money on the table. Right, but management questions coming, and multi-sided platforms. We went through this earlier, so I will skip this. Channel. Yeah. If you think about it, the reason channel is important, this is your most important link between value proposition and your customer segment. Right? It is all a question of channel. Okay? And when I talk about channel, it's not just, who's my distributor. That's very basic. Channel questions are deeper than that. And therefore it requires you to actually spend some time thinking about it. The reason is because there are 5 channel faces. Who is your distributor is item number 4. It almost comes later. But your item number 1 is, how does somebody become aware of your product? Right? Short of, standing in the street and shouting to everybody. Right? I have a mosquito device. I mean, how does somebody become aware? Right? And it's a very, very pertinent question because as a startup, you have very little money. How do you promote this? Right?
Online marketing.
Online is one, right? But do you reach all your customer segment? Right?
Only the targeted customer.
Again, why would they read it? Why would they even click it? Why would they even go to the website? You know how it is, right? All of us get, whole bunch of mails, right? And I have a whole bunch of mail that goes into junk. I have a whole bunch of mail that gets weeded out by Boxby. Because I don't want to read all of this stuff, right? So online marketing works, and it may work, but if you are not targeted, it doesn't work, right? So the question is, how do you do this, right? Obviously, there is the search engine optimization, where you have to pay Facebook for it, right? I mean, but these are issues of how do you reach the market at the most cost-efficient way, right? As a startup, okay? Because it could often boil down to who's the connect, right? So some of the IT incubated companies had the benefit of faculty building relationships with them, right? Right. So the faculty created the awareness for those products, right? Right. Ashok Jhunjhunwala does it all the time, right? He has some big shot come to this meeting, and he has a line of companies, including many of the companies Kerenci invested in, sort of present to them, right? That is a way of creating awareness for this, right? So, going back to my question is whether private incubators can ever succeed, they have to compete with something like what an IIT is able to offer, right? Because you can offer faculties who are often consultants to companies, right? It offers dedicated incubation resources that is well connected, right? You have alumni that are very successful, right? These are all things that private accelerators need to compete with, which is not easy, right? Which is why I'm very clear, it's not a business I'm getting into, ever. Right? Done it once, done, finished. Right? Let me get back whatever I can out of my investments and be done with it. Right? So awareness is the key. Right? Because it's too expensive to advertise in media and newspaper and all that kind. Newspapers maybe not so bad, but will newspaper reach your customers? Yeah, it's fine for B2C. How about B2B?
Exhibitions.
Yeah, exhibitions is a good example, right? So some of the startups I've worked with, they go to very specific exhibitions, right? So they have the electricity, power consumption space. They turn up for those exhibitions across India, right? And the specific ones that they attend, right? There are all kinds of festivals around the world. We have seen some of the companies that have pitched for us. They specifically go to a particular festival in Japan, right? They will go to a particular event in Las Vegas, right? So they're very focused on where they think their chosen customer would turn up, right? Or in our case, with our simulator business, it's the hospitals, right? It's the medical schools linked to hospitals, right? So I have a very specific segment, and I need to worry about how I can create awareness amongst those, right? In some of it, you have no choice maybe to knock the door and walk up and down the steps many times, right? But this is very hard work. If you think about it, this is almost the hardest work. Second bit, if you have developed your product well, it's okay, right? So going back to the simulator, right? We go to the hospitals and they said, yep, sounds like a good idea. Can you leave one of your simulators here? And then you say, oh, I don't have money, right? I need to raise money to buy one and then I can put it there, right? These are issues startup face with, right? So one of the things that you sort of think through is how does your customer evaluate your offering, right? So in the case of the microorganisms, trials, right? In trials says, can you get a paid trial? Very often you can't. So you end up with a unpaid trial, right? So you take the risk, right? Can you actually get a beta customer, even if they don't pay the full product? So you have a minimum viable product, right? And you be honest with the customer and you say, this is not my final version with bells and whistles, but let me, can I work with you with the minimum viable? To some extent, Detect did that with Reliance, right? So that's how they develop the product, right? It is cheaper, you reduce your risk. Okay. So the evaluation of the business proposition, right? Then the rest of the channel decisions are actually easy, right? Do they buy online, do they buy at a shop, whatever, right? You design the channel according to what your business is, right? And then the delivery takes place, and of course, there's always after sales, right? If there's no after sales, you don't get, it's like almost normal, right? Every time after a restaurant, they want to have a feedback as to whether you enjoy the experience, right? Why do they do that? They need to know that to stay competitive, they need to find out what the customer wants. The customer happy? Is the customer delighted? Because otherwise, you find that your business could disappear, or you cannot scale the business, right? They might buy it the first time and then say, well, I didn't really see value, right? So if I bought Pocket, and by the way, I bought 3 units for my house, if it wasn't catching mosquitoes, would I ever buy it again? Right? The only reason I'm happy with them is because it's catching mosquitoes, right? And my wife swears by it. She says for 3 months she hasn't been bitten. She's been bitten, but at least she's able to sleep, right? Not bitten too much, right? So, all of that, rigid evaluate is important. And of course, channels, you have a direct channel and indirect channel, right? Direct channel, you sell directly to your customer. Indirect, you go through a distributor, value-added vendor, or whatever, right? One of those. But I would say, that channel question is a terribly, terribly important question, right? And which is why I almost spend more time on it than the customer relationship question, because many of your customer relationship is what we call personal assistance, is direct. You actually go and see the customer and sort of say why this is a good product, right? And many of this, if I take Planis as an example, and they have to go and see the port authorities and sort of say why it is, right? It's personal assistance, it's direct, okay? And when you become big enough, right? If I go back to, you will say, I will have a dedicated person just serving my biggest 3 customers. The rest of it is just market, right? But the biggest 3 customers you don't want to lose, right? So you make it dedicated, right? So if you think about it, this is a straightforward customer relationships, right? That links the value proposition you're offering to your customer segment. Now the innovations have been in the other areas, right? Co-creation. Many evolutions, you co-create a solution. I was just having a discussion this morning with one of the companies that's applying to present to Keiretsu. And they have an e-commerce solution for creative talent, right? Now, here they have a system that helps the customer co-create what they want, right? Everybody wants a video, but what kind of video, right? What kind of genre? Is it animation? Is it a corporate video? Is it a investor-focused video, right? All of that, they have created a system that would enable the customer to literally co-create, right? Why is it co-create? You're using the system, which is the startups, but the customer co-creates their solution, and based on that co-created solution, they then find the talent that will solve your problem, on which they take a commission, right? So co-creation is becoming quite an interesting space, as digitization is increasing, right? I mean, the oldest example is co-creation. When you go and get a specs, is this better, right? All that, it is co-creation, right? Now, self-service, right? In the traditional way, the traditional examples are ATMs, right? They don't need cashiers anymore. You go take your own money, right? Can you imagine the amount of headcount they do it? And the guys who made a ton of money on self-service is iTunes, is Apple. You go download your own things, you download your own app, you download your own things, they literally had to do nothing for you. You do your own work and you pay them, right? What better business model can they be? Right? So that's self-service. And communities, you're already aware, right? Your Facebook, your LinkedIn, and all the communities that are evolving. And I would say watch this space, because this space is changing, right? So there's a company called Renola that is going the way of private social media, right? So this is an emerging space, and also people have come up with walled, a firewall social media, right? Communities. And automated services, I was doing a project in the Maldives once, and every time I log in, there is some stuff that says, holiday in the Maldives, right? And actually I was doing work, I was not looking to go for a holiday. But people begin to read, what you are searching, and then they automated service. Okay, so for me, that right hand side was the more critical bits. These things are pretty straightforward. You could almost read it. What is your revenue model? You sell, you have a subscription, you lease it, you get a license fee, you get a brokerage. Pretty straightforward, right? So nothing new here. But it's useful for you to identify a revenue stream, because you have options. Do I sell the asset? Like the plan is, do I sell the ROVs? Do I get a usage fee? Right? I go serve X number of days, I only get the usage fee for that period of time. Right? Is there a subscription model there somewhere? Right? So these are business model questions, right? Going back to my earlier slide, think of the alternatives. Right? The alternatives are business model questions. Right? What is good for your business? Right? What are resources? Yeah, you have your factory. There's again very straightforward, right? Human capital is a resource. Your intellectual property in particular is a huge resource, which is a big element, right? And of course, money is a huge resource. And I would almost argue, when I talk about financial capital here, it's not the money that you raise now. Sometimes it's your ability to raise more, right? So the success is not when, Keiretsu members, all the angels together have put some money into you. That's good. But until you raise the next round, that's nothing, because you will burn it in no time. Right? So it gives you a leap of faith. Somebody believed in you and they put money in you. And of course, when they have put money in you, they also have a vested interest to try and help you do your second round. Right? And some of them will actually roll up sleeves and help you through that. So I would say one of the key resources for a startup is your ability to raise sufficient amount of money to take you to profitability. And sometimes that's 3 years, sometimes that's 5 years. Right? We struggled when we were raising money for the EV autos, right? You can't wait for money, right? You just have to see customers, you have to push your product, right? It's like Ronnie Screwvala in one of the Tycons basically said, he went to Delhi, they said, no business. He had to literally come and tell his employees, I can only pay half, right? And then he says, people come to him asking for money, and then he says, okay, where's your business? Oh, when we get the money, we will start the business. And he says, goodbye, right? So some of it is we can't wait to raise the money. So of course we incur whatever, right? Pooled money, pooled resources, beg, borrow, steal, whatever, right? And you sort of build these businesses. And we sort of say, even if you give us a 1 million, 2 million, we can go somewhere. But those people who had 1, 2 million to give were so wary of giving it because they weren't sure you could raise the remaining 30 and the remaining 100 thereafter because that's what it takes for a business like that to succeed. Right? If you think about how much money Ather has raised, it's crores and crores, and some of it from parties who could be detrimental to them, we don't know. We'll see how it plays out. But the ability to raise money is critical in this kind of developmental space. Right? So the comparison for me is Ather. Right? What did it do right? What did it do not do right? I didn't invest in them, so I can take a completely objective view. So sometimes it's not the financial capital per se, it's your ability to raise more money, right? So I am in that situation in both these companies, EV and the forestry business, because we need to set up plants. So it's not small amounts of money, right? And in the forestry business, where we use bamboo to replace timber, we have probably already sunk 15 million into it, right? But I need another 50 million, right? So it's the challenge is that people who could sign 1-2 million checks don't want to touch it because they are not sure you will actually complete your 50 million raise, right? After I raise 50 million, of course, there are a whole lot of people who come, right? So in terms of resources, sometimes depending on your business, you need to look at your ability to raise financial capital, right? I mean, we believed it because of some of the connections and some of the assets, illiquid though it might be, that the founder had, and that's why we didn't wait for the money. We kept going, right? We have to build a business, right? Can't wait for everything, right? In fact, that's what entrepreneurship is about. Right? It's like maybe 30% knowledge. Right? 10% luck, because everything you need a bit of luck. Or maybe 20% knowledge, 10% luck. 70% is attitude. Right? It's your dare. Right? I mean, come what may, I'll make this work. Right? Of course, you should have figured out your business model. You should have customers. You should have all of that lined up. But after that, it's a dare. Right? You dare to do it. And if you don't dare, don't be an entrepreneur. Again, activities is pretty simple. There's the things that you do. You sell, you make, you create, whatever. Right? And you always need partners, right? Because you're not effective doing everything yourselves, right? So if I take my EV business, all the parts come from majors around the world. Why would I make it? Batteries come from the battery makers. Why would I make it? Right? So you're better off collaborating, right? And in some of those collaborations, some of the majors have actually designed their parts to our needs. So actually we've done a lot of investment and put a lot of effort into it, because how do I beat an incumbent? The only way I can beat an incumbent is if I design it from scratch. An incumbent often designs from their existing product. Right? That's the difference, right? When I design from scratch from a white piece of paper and design everything, and I keep going back to my suppliers and say design it to the way it is. Right? So that's very important, right? Acquisition of particular resources. Right? You design it for me, right? And if I have the relationships, then it's less risky, right? So these are the things I want to do with partners, right? Particularly, we don't want to do it ourselves, we want to do it with partners. And sometimes the partners also look at you and say, if you succeed, I succeed too. Right? That becomes a great collaborative relationship with somebody else. Because you can't do everything, certainly not as a startup. Okay, and at the end of the business model canvas, okay, we did start 15 minutes late, but so this is a quick slide just to say how you go from all that analysis from your value proposition canvas, your business model canvas to a business plan, right? So again, someone said, yeah, management profile, the team. So these are the elements that's covered in the business plan, right? On top of the business model, right? Then you need to do your financial model and your risk analysis, right? On various assumptions, how will the business grow? And sometimes this modeling is important, right? So, and fresh on my mind, I was just doing the financial model for the EV Auto. The problem is, it's profitable from day one. That's not my problem. My problem is working capital. You need at least 3 times sales as working capital. And you can imagine if you have 3 times sales and you're ramping sales, right? Your cash burn is huge, right? It's phenomenally huge. The only reason I need money is for working capital, right? We even have the factory, we have the facilities, all of that we have. But the burn is working capital, right? So you do need your financial analysis scenario. If I don't get, what happens, right? How do you model that? Because the environment, market's healthy, whatever, right? What is the environment which operate? An implementation roadmap and a risk analysis. So if you put all of this together with your business model, you basically have your business plan, right? But go back to my original slide. If let's not get into the business plan until you actually have a business model that works, right? What's the point of writing up a huge document? So what we do a half cap. You do an information memorandum, which is not quite the full business plan, but sort of summarizes the key things, right? Because very often, when you're raising money, people say, "Can you send me a document?" Right? So you often do in a bridged version of a business plan, which is called an info memo. Written well, you could capture the essence of your business in 3 or 4 pages, right? And then you put some pictures to embellish it. I even thought for this company, I even did a spidergram, right? In comparison of various parameters, range, time to charge, whatever, right? Cost of usage, right? And you can do a spidergram. The more pictorial you make an info memo, the more excited somebody is going to be, right? And I'm done. So I leave you with that slide I started with, which is, do you have a fit? Happy to take questions.
When you are searching for the fit, generally, let's say on the right hand side, the customer segment or even exploring the channel, there could be multiple options.
Yes.
And of course, everything will go to validation.
Yes.
Sometimes when you choose too many, you spread too thin.
Yeah.
When you choose too many, you spread too thin.
Yeah.
And if you choose only few, then they may not work out. So then you go iteratively and you lose time. So in your experience, how do you strike this balance?
I think there's no substitute for experimentation, right? Which is always one of the challenge, right? I mean, we had everything going for us with Johnson & Johnson with our simulators, right? Everything. They were there with us, they gave us the surgeons, they went to Sweden, worked with our supplier, so we are in partnership with another company. Top of the range product, we had everything, right? We have an OEM customer, and then they fail, or they fail us, right? I think right, and you can sort of look at hindsight and say, why did you only focus on one segment and one customer? It was so promising, right? Why didn't we at the outset think of alternative customers? But that's the nature of the beast, right? To some extent, you sort of experiment to see if it actually works out. And then if it doesn't, whether you can go back, raise more money, and address other segments, because somewhere in your head, you knew that was also a possible application, right?
But in this case, you could have given this to other customers?
See, there are other problems. I do have exclusivity periods, right? So, and my alternate is, will there be any better than Johnson & Johnson? And my 2 alternatives was Smith & Nephew and Stryker. There are not many players in this. In that segment, there are not many players, right? And the reason we picked Johnson & Johnson, they were 70% of the market.
But you can go to B2C.
B2C, customer paying 100,000, 150,000 for a simulator. That's not going to happen. Hospitals, right? Which is what we did. We pivoted the business model to start working with hospitals that are attached to universities, right? So our biggest partner now is NUSH, NUS Hospital, because they are, they are attached to National University of Singapore. So they're, and if I get a sign up from them, almost every other guy, if I get a sign up from NUSH and SGH, Singapore General Hospital, I don't have to worry about any of the other hospitals. And I probably don't even need to worry about branding across Southeast Asia. Right? So where did the guy come? The Prime Minister or the former Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea has a problem, he comes to Singapore for treatment. Right? So once I have Singapore branding, I'm done. Right? But I had to pivot my model.
Correct.
This,
Sir, I have a question, like whenever we are, any startup company come up with a product, sometimes already a bigger company is there in that market. Whether it has, a startup company has a very good, value proposition or good performance and all that. But still, like in Ather Energy case, they started this vehicle, but there are other players already in the market, bigger player. So how they chose this market? Don't they think that this bigger market will itself come and they can occupy their space?
That's always a challenge, right?
So how they go about that? And why they started in this? Means I just
Why
want
did
to
they start
understand.
Ather, right? Ather has had an interesting journey. I don't know them directly, right? So I only know by what other people say. Maybe you know it better. I think where Ather has been successful is raising so much money when they didn't even have a product, right? And I would say they were lucky. Maybe being part of IIT enabled them to do so. And I'm raising a fraction of that for EV autos when I already have a product that is tested and that performs better than anything else in the market. Why?
Better advertising, better
Whatever,
Networks.
whatever, right? Whatever. Better, the incubator being with IT helps you, whatever, right? Any number of reasons, right? Could even be luck. I'm not ruling that out. I said 10% is luck.
But
Right?
there is
No.
always a chance that bigger company will launch in that market. So what is how they don't think about when they are making business
Yeah,
plan?
but we do. When I'm doing EV autos, I am thinking about what Mahindra would do.
Yes. So how?
Right? As I said, my performance is better than theirs. Right? So what's in it for Mahindra? I know the guy one level down from Anand Mahindra. So this is what I have, right? Once I succeed, or once I prove it, I'd rather go and convince them you should buy me out. Instead of you developing it yourself. The problem for incumbents in development is they start with a chassis, a design that they already have. And sometimes that doesn't work, right? And sometimes they don't want to develop something too fast that destroys their incumbent business. Because they have a huge diesel market, right? Combustion engine is a huge market for them. EV is not. Why should I touch EV? Maybe the time they would touch EV, we would have moved so far ahead, it's cheaper for them to buy us than to build us, right? Then they would say, they will chuck the incumbent business and say, I'll take the EV, I have the distribution network, so we share. Right? You pay me for my IP, you have the distribution network, so you keep that upside, right? Then you have a deal.
But they could have also put an arm which should have developed this EV.
They should, why didn't they do it?
So that's what I wanted to know. Why they don't?
Why didn't they do it, right? I think big companies, right, is going back to my example with Johnson & Johnson, right? The product that we developed for them, they were so enamored by it. And then you have a change in that particular development team, and it all goes for toss. And then there's politics between Singapore, which is the headquarters for the region, and North America. And then there's politics between those two organizations. Big organizations are full of politics. So the question is, why? I don't think I always know the answer why, but there are a number of reasons: incumbency, vested interests of the organization, a number of reasons why they don't do it. Right? But anyway, with most startups, the question you always ask, taking your example, somebody else is in that business. I think the question is a very hard question. Unless your solution is phenomenally cheaper than the other guys, don't go there. Because they have the power of incumbency. They have the muscle to kill you. So you should go there only if, right? Or in the case of auto, even after my 5 years of grow, I'm still less than, I'm about 5 to 6% of market share. Right? People might leave you alone. Right?
So, but sometimes it happens like even if you provide cheaper, then to destroy your company, to destroy your startup, they will provide free of cost. Like the same thing happened in our institute. One startup called Torque Cycle. So they provided for the institute like free of cost for the trial, and then Zoomcar launched their pedal cycle, and at the same time O4 cycle. So those two companies completely destroyed Torque, and finally there is no more.
See, this threat is always there, right? And again, this is only my opinion. I mean, you can take Ather as an example, where Hero Honda invested 30%. Is Hero Honda going to be helpful to them or not? I don't know. How will this play out? So, to be honest, if I was a board member of Ather at that time, I would have asked n number of questions, and I would have worried about n number of things before letting Hero Honda take the 30% stake. Or if I let them take that stake, I may have wanted certain clauses which will not tie me down to them. Because they are in the same business. Right? Do they want to help you or do they want to kill you? Both options are possible. You can't read their mind. You absolutely cannot read their mind. Right? So you have to think that through. Right? So sometimes, this is complex, and some of the things, therefore, as a startup, most of you all are young compared to the white hairs that we have, is we've seen enough things in our lives to sort of know what could go wrong, right? It's Murphy's law, right? What can go wrong will go wrong, right? So the question is, how do you deal with it, right? So sometimes it's helpful, right? Which is where an incubator is helpful. An incubator like IIT is helpful because you've got a whole bunch of mentors who are ex-CEOs, ex-consultants, who have enough grey hair and no hair, right, to sort of help you think these through. And some of it are very hard questions.
This Johnson's example which you gave.
Yeah, I'm struggling to hear you.
Ah.
Right? Age gives the ears a little bit of damage as well.
The example of Johnson's, which you said didn't go well the way you thought it should have gone. From the business model canvas perspective, where do you think the failure happened? Or is it something which is not captured in the business model canvas that we had discussed till now?
So, two questions, right? The value proposition was very clear, or maybe it wasn't. Right? Maybe I misunderstood Johnson & Johnson's value proposition. Or, okay, so the initial team had a very clear need for this product, right? And what was their need for the product? If I have these simulators, I can put it on my various centers where the surgeons come to get trained in using Johnson & Johnson kits. Where do they make the money? They make the money on the sale of the kits. So the simulator was actually a cost for them, right? So one of the business model questions we could have asked, was that good enough, right? We are solving their need to do marketing to sell their kits, but this per se is not reducing cost for them, it's increasing cost for them, right? First business model question. Second is, would they have been more willing if we had given it to them on a pay-per-use basis, as opposed to paying, 75,000 for the first 10 kids and then maybe 120,000 for the equipment, right? So second business model question, right? If we have designed the model differently, right? Your revenue model is different. Will they have been more willing? Okay? So those are business model questions. And then there's always the unpredictable, right? How the hell did I know the whole lot of people, 5 or 6 people we were working with, would leave at about the same time? That I couldn't control. But the business model questions, were there other business model factors? That's worth thinking about. Right? So we haven't written them off. We think they will come back. But as a startup, I can't wait for them to come back. I need to keep churning cash. I need to keep building a business. Otherwise, you close shop, you're end. We still have time, so any more questions?
So we could formally close, and maybe if you have a few minutes to
Yes.
spare, then
Yeah.
kind of informally also connect with Subra sir. So thank you very much, sir. This is one of the most important tools that you can kind of use to think about the business model, particularly the value proposition canvas. And I think not just, I think it is always good to kind of revisit it, understand the, I'm right, Mr. Russell, to kind of revisit it, understand whether, you have everything in place, particularly in the canvas. So thank you very much, sir, and hopefully we'll connect with you again for a workshop as well for some of us.
Yeah, that's right.
Where we can probably delve more deeper with each one.
Yeah. I think 2 hours was too short to delve into it,
Definitely.
I had some spares and,
So just a little summary from our end.
Oh, okay.
Sir.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. It was a nice conversation.
Thanks a
So
lot.
if you could just be around for a few minutes,
Sure,
if
sure.
anyone
No
would
problem.
like to just have a word with